The most dangerous tech tree tanks in World of Tanks are probably not what you'd expect straight away. They are in fact these tanks. So keep watching to find out why they are so good at taking people out and why you may want to try them out yourself. Kicking it off then, we do have the Batat 25T, and this is a surprising one because it is one of the oldest tanks in World of Tanks, or at least currently within the game, that you can pick up on the tech tree. And we wanted to do tech tree vehicles in this video because it at least gives you an indication as to some of the strongest, and you don't have to pay for any of them, you don't have to get any of them in the game. And ultimately a lot of the premium or reward vehicles are played by some of the best players, which is why they have their statistics skewed and you see them higher up on the list, and they technically would be if the majority of players had them. So without further ado, the Batat 25T has 390 alpha damage, but it doesn't just have one shell, it has 5 of them, which is one of the reasons why it is so good in the game and why most people underestimate how good the Batat 25T can be in today's meta, even with all of the changes that have gone on. And it used to be one of the strongest tanks back in the day, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of fallen at the wayside between some of the newer releases of tanks, and we have one of the newer releases in this video. But either way, the Batat 25T is very, very good at being able to do a lot of damage over a period of time, and of course being an autoloader has a decent intricate reload of 2.73, a weird integer for wargaming to add, but either way it's not bad. It will also combine with a 0.36 dispersion, which isn't awful, makes it usable, and certainly with equipment you can make it a lot better. And the great thing about the Batat over some of the other tanks is that it is super fast. You got 65 kilometers an hour top speed. It's very, very slim profile in terms of the size of the vehicle, so you can get behind ridge lines a lot easier than some of the taller vehicles in the game. And of course, being that you are much faster, you can avoid a lot of shots. But the whole point of the Batat is that it is a sneaky assassin. It gets behind people and can surprise them. You can come away with a lot of damage really, really quickly, and then you can leave and you can use obstacles to avoid taking any shells in return, or at least deal a lot more damage than you would be expecting to take in a trade with a typical vehicle where you're fighting one-on-one and you're dealing one shot for one shot, etc. So with the Batat 25T, it was one of my more surprising vehicles to see at the top of the list in terms of the damage, or at least the amount of tanks destroyed per game versus the amount of times you're taken out in it. And yeah, there's kind of no real surprise that this is one of those tanks. It has one of the highest or biggest auto-loading clips, so 5 shots in a clip makes it one of the highest, and therefore you are able to dish out a lot of damage over a lot of different targets and take out multiple people per clip, especially towards the end of the game. Obviously towards the end of the game, that's where you see a lot of the damage ending up coming in, and where people have taken a lot of damage over the game, where you can go in and you can full clip someone. Obviously with this tank you've got 1950 alpha damage when you fire every single shell, if you pen every single shell, and the penetration on the standard rounds, they are APCR, so they're not awful. 259 millimeters, so you know, they're in that kind of normal medium tank range, and then you get 330 heat pen, which is amazing for dealing with some of those super heavy vehicles, things like Type 4s, Type 5s, any of the Mausians, the Mauses, etc. It's very nice to have the heat rounds that this gets, so you've got the kind of best combination with the rounds that you can fire in the tank. Obviously HE, not probably worth actually loading a HE clip in this thing because it does have a 40-second reload, which is one of the reasons why maybe it's not the best tank in today's meta, because you got a 40-second reload, you're not doing a lot, and essentially you have to be able to spot for your team or spot for yourself or maneuver around the map to be able to use that 40 seconds effectively, and then you can surprise someone else instantly when you're reloaded to make it work. Now, when you do have a 2.73 second inch-clip reload, it's not the worst, but it's certainly no TVP, and so you are having to kind of stay in combat with someone a lot longer, because when you're having to deal 4 lots of that 2.73 seconds, you're spending about 11 to 12 seconds actually sat in front of someone, or where you could potentially get hit in combat with them, and therefore you might take a few more shots than you typically would with something like a TVP, where you can poke around the corner and deal all of your shots so quickly and then kind of leave again. But the whole point about the Batat is that you get the increased damage total that you can deal in one singular sitting, which is what makes it so good. And obviously when you then combine that with the OK dispersion of 0.36, and then when you put consumables and equipment and stuff like that, you can get it down quite considerably as well, but it doesn't make it perfect, and certainly you can miss quite a few shots when you're firing on the move. The Batat does have not the best dispersion when moving because of the speed that the tank can go, 65 kilometers an hour, so you do need to get up close if you are wanting to kind of sneak in and not have to aim entirely every single round. It's certainly no sniper from sitting at the back, because you know you got to fire off all of these shells and hope that you're hitting every single time, and obviously when you're further back they're probably only slim shots, so you're not able to unload the full clip. But because of the fact that it does have that clip, but having the ability to spread out that damage over 5 shells versus having an FV4005, which some of you probably thought, maybe that's the tank that is going to be the most deadly, or whatever you want to call it, on World of Tanks. But no, obviously you can only deal damage to one vehicle with that, and therefore you're not going to be able to deal multiple shots of damage to various different vehicles and finish them off. And of course you have to pen. So yeah, with this, very, very good at being able to do that, which is why it's able to spread the damage, deal a lot of damage all in one go, and hence why you've been seeing all of the clips that we've been seeing behind this little video. So let's jump into the next tank, because we've done the Batat a little bit of justice. Now the French tanks seem to be taking the show, because the next one is the AMX-50B. This is the tier 10 French heavy tank that isn't really a heavy tank, it's more like a medium heavy tank that doesn't really have any armor unless you hit the hull of it, at which point you're probably doing the wrong thing. So yeah, the AMX-50B, obviously very weak turret, can be penned by literally everyone that you're facing, including tier 8s, literally penning you straight through the front of the turret, which is amazing. But at the same time you are dealing 400 damage per shell, and you don't just have one of them. No, this is also an autoload, as you probably will know if you're watching this video, with 4 shells in the mag with 1600 damage, and it's really able to just dominate opponents because of the fact that, unlike the Batat, because you've got 4 shells of 400, you're dealing 1600 damage in one go, but you're also reloading an extra 10 seconds faster than the Batat. You also have better accuracy than the Batat. This one sits at 0.34 accuracy, which is actually pretty okay, and you also have a better intraclip reload than the Batat. So not only are you dealing your damage quicker in terms of the intraclip reload, but you're also more accurate, so you can lock down opponents much easier. It also goes 65 kilometers an hour, so very, very nice indeed. So when you are maneuvering around and getting around the map, it can be very, very good. Now the power to weight ratio between the two vehicles is not quite the same. The Batat has an extra 10 horsepower to ton ratio, but the AMX-50B does have that armor and the chunkiness, and of course the ramming potential that you see in a few videos with the 50B. So yeah, it's quite nice to be able to not only go in, deal a ton of damage, but also ram opponents when you do need it at the end of the day. Of course, the AMX-50B not only has the decent penetration of 257 with its standard rounds, but it also gets 325 with its premium APCR. But it doesn't get heat ammunition, unfortunately, which means some of the heavily armored vehicles can be a bit of a pain to fight with because of the heat rounds just being better in general when fighting kind of sloped armor and stuff like that, and being able to actually deal damage to those super heavy Germans and stuff like that. So either way, there's very, very few trade-offs when it comes to the 50B versus the Batat 25T, and in general the 50B is probably going to be a better tank for most players, as the Batat 25T is probably going to deal more damage when it comes to single encounters where you can surprise someone, you can get round them, but the 50B is just a generally better vehicle to be able to do a lot of damage in your games. But it is very, very good once again at being able to take out vehicles with the reasonable alpha damage of 400, and because you have the 4 shells, meaning that, you know, at the late game or mid stage of the game, if you meet someone and you have the hit points to trade yourself, and you can take 1 or maybe even 2 hits, you can deal all of that damage and remove them from the game, which is a very, very big positive of playing these kind of French autoloaders and just autoloaders in general. But the next one isn't an autoloader, but I wanted to showcase all of these because I felt like, you know, sometimes you want to see some of the weirder vehicles or some of the tanks that don't necessarily get the recognition that they always do. Now, I'm not saying all of these tanks are super meta, but they're certainly very good in the right hands, and certainly the 50B is a very, very good tank either way, regardless of whether it's played by a good player or someone that's not as good. Yeah, it's certainly a very, very good tank. 10 degrees of gun depression as well, make it very good on a ridgeline, and so yeah, just a very, very powerful vehicle with a ton of damage potential, and that's probably why it's sitting at number 2 in the damage done, or at least the destroyed per battle versus taken out. And therefore, let's move on to the next one. So then, moving from one of the oldest kind of vehicles that we've had in the game, the 50B, the Batat 25T, been in the game for a long time, we actually move over to one of the newer vehicles in the game, which is the Hori 3, the tier 10 Japanese tank destroyer, and it is very, very good at finishing off opponents, and that is because it has that decent alpha damage combined with a very good reload for the alpha damage that it does get, alongside the relatively decent speed and good maneuverability of the tank, being able to turn quite quickly compared to some other tanks like the E3 for example. The frontal armor is not insane, but it certainly is able to pull off a couple of bounces here and there, but for the most part it does not get the best armor in the game, but it is very, very good either way because of the fact that you're chunking away 700 damage hits, which is amazing because of the fact that you get decent penetration as standard. You got 305 pen, which means basically everything. You should be able to pen if you're hitting the weak points, bar some of the super heavies obviously and E3s and stuff like that, unless you hit the weak point. And then when you need the premium penetration, you got 360 millimeters on your premium rounds, which is, yeah, more than enough for basically every tank in the game. It's not absolutely crazy levels of like a Jaegeru for example, but it is up there with some of the highest penetrations in the game on their premium rounds. So yeah, it's very, very nice to have, and the tank in general, just a very, very nice tank to play. It gets good dispersion, 0.33 on a tank like this. Yeah, not bad at all. And when you consider that it's moving a lot slower than things like the 50B and the Batat 25T, you're able to be a lot more precise with every single shell that you fire in this versus some of the autoloaders in the game, which is probably why it's sitting in that kind of third place spot for the the destructions per battle, or whatever you want to call it. But obviously it's not the only thing that this tank has. It does have a decent amount of hit points, 2000, nothing crazy but not bad. 400 meters view range is great as well, so you can at least spot people if they fire at you, which is brilliant. And of course you have 7 degrees of gun depression as well, and because you're kind of a frontline, kind of almost like a heavy tank destroyer where you can go in and you can, you know, trade with opponents and stuff like that because of your high alpha damage, almost playing it like an E100 that doesn't get a turret. Yeah, I mean, it is just very, very good at being able to deal a lot more damage, and of course having better DPM than both the autoloaders that we've already spoken about gives you a lot more opportunity to finish off the low health tanks in the game. And hence why it's so dangerous to come up against one of these things, because it's just chunking away 700 damage every 14.67 seconds based on a base reload. And of course, as soon as you start putting in things like rammer and you start adding in bond equipment, that sort of thing, consumables, you can get that reload down to about 11 seconds, which is crazy to think that you're dealing 700 damage every single time that you kind of can poke around a corner. And in about 10 seconds to 11 seconds you can quite easily move back around a corner and then come back around, side scrape out, do all of that sort of jazz as you normally would, but you're just dealing a lot more damage with this one versus a traditional heavy tank that you would be taking. And so yeah, when it's played correctly, the Hori 3 is absolutely one of the kind of best tanks at being able to just give no kind of effort to kind of rinsing through people, and of course dealing a lot of damage. Now, given that it is a new tank, the statistics probably skewed a little bit, and then they probably not settled down entirely, but they're not going to be skewed to massively, and it's certainly been played a lot over the course of the time that it's been available. And so, yeah, I don't think it's going to be too much different to what we're expect in the end result of what this tank is all about. But yeah, I'll be interested to see your thoughts on all of these tanks that we've showcased today. And of course, if you want me to do any specific videos, or you have any kind of, or you want me to continue this for tier 9, tier 8, etc., then let me know in the comment section down below. Hopefully it's been a little bit of an interesting one to see some tanks that you probably didn't expect to be the most dangerous, and hopefully you kind of understood that we weren't looking at kind of the premium vehicles, because yeah, I mean, they are skewed quite heavily when it comes to played by some of the best players in the game, and hence why they're going to have way better statistics on average, even if they're worse at the kind of thing that we're trying to look at here. And yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe if you want to see some more, and check out this video on screen if you want more, and I'll see you there.